On today's episode of Notable New England, I'll be speaking to Larry O'Toole, who is the founder of Gentle Giant Moving Company. Larry wrote a memoir titled Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart, and we're going to discuss that, his business philosophies, and how Gentle Giant Moving Company transformed the moving industry as we know it. Stick around. Hello, lovely listeners, and thank you for tuning into this edition of Notable New England. If you're new here, my name is Gretchen B., and I am a proud, lifelong New Englander. My mission with this podcast is to educate you on the people, places, and things that make this region of our country so incredible, with the hope that you'll get out into your New England communities and become ambassadors to others about this amazing place that we get to call home. The big move-in weekend for college students coming back to the area and the high volume of lease renewals that will be happening for September 1st will be here before we know it. I thought it timely to have a conversation with Larry O'Toole, who is the founder of Gentle Giant Moving Company that started right in Boston, Massachusetts, and has now expanded to other areas of the country. Larry wrote a memoir where he tells the story of the founding of Gentle Giant, his business philosophies, and how Gentle Giant transformed the moving industry as we know it. And I think you're going to enjoy the conversation and learn a lot from Larry. Before we get to the interview, though, let's kick things off, as we always do, with Wicked Light Bites, community-oriented stories and happenings from each New England state. There's great news for children 18 years old and under in New Hampshire this summer. Free meals will be available to them thanks to the federally funded summer meals program by the USDA. Free meals will be available at various community centers and schools across New Hampshire, and I'll put a link in the show notes for the location and hours for each site. Families do not need to apply to prove income eligibility. Information for this item comes from Anne Marie Timmons at New Hampshire Public Radio. Rhode Islanders are encouraged to participate in the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority's survey in hopes of improving faster, more reliable, and more frequent transit service connecting metropolitan Providence. With the study results, RIPTA hopes to apply for more federal funding to improve transit, including dedicated bus lanes, transit signal priority, and revamped bus shelters and signage. I've provided a link in the show notes for the Metro Connector survey, which is available in both English and Spanish. Rhode Islanders are encouraged to participate in public forums and workshops to share their opinions. Information for those upcoming meetings will be in the show notes for your convenience as well. Information for this item comes from Joshua Gogan and Elizabeth Turley at WPRI 12. Connecticut residents and visitors, mark your calendars for early August because that's when the Essex Steam Train and Riverboat will be starting to sell tickets to their very popular North Pole Express. The North Pole Express runs on certain dates between November 20th and December 23rd. The trips are 90 minutes in length and include holiday sing-alongs, hot chocolate and sugar cookies, a visit from Santa and Mrs. Claus, and children are invited to wear their favorite pajamas. Be warned, though, the tickets sell very fast. On August 3rd at 9 a.m., you can go to EssexSteamTrain.com and book half and full premium class cars, full and four-seat first-class cars, and quarter, full, and four-seat coach class cars. All remaining first-class and and coach tickets can be purchased at 9 a.m. on August 5th at EssexSteamTrain.com. I have put the ticket link in the show notes for your convenience. Tickets are only available online on a first-come, first-served basis. There are no phone or walk-up sales. Information for this item comes from Jennifer Lambert at NBC Connecticut. The Somerset Humane Society received a $10,000 check to help pay for the construction of a new facility thanks to a Skowhegan, Maine man who found a way to turn his late wife's belongings into lasting treasures for others. Carl Ronco, who lost his wife Roberta, teamed up with his neighbor Victoria Masia to found Grammy's Boutique, which is an online storefront where they sell Roberta's belongings and donate all proceeds to help animals in need. They've sold over 1,000 items over the past year, including glassware, jewelry, clothing, shoes, and other items. The sale honors Carl's wife, Roberta, who loved animals. Officials at the Somerset Humane Society said that the $10,000 gift they received will help provide a better environment and expanded services for animals in need. Information for this item comes from Ryan Bell at News Center, Maine. A Boston, Massachusetts hotel has been named the best pet-friendly hotel in America, according to USA Today's 10 Best Readers' Choice Awards. Boston's Fairmont Copley Plaza ranked number 1, and Fairmont Copley officials said they were honored to receive the recognition. According to USA Today, quote, the landmark Fairmont Copley Plaza in Boston, a symbol of the city's rich history and elegance, does more than just welcome pets. They roll out the red carpet. This luxury hotel pampers pups with the Fairmont Friend package, which includes a guide to dog-friendly attractions, an exclusive biscuit box, and a complimentary doggy blowout. Travelers missing their own furry friends can visit the Fairmont's canine ambassador, Corey Copley, when she's on duty in the lobby greeting guests, end quote. The Fairmont Copley had this to say, quote, at our hotel, pet-friendly has never been a category, it's a philosophy of welcome. From thoughtfully curated in-room dining for canine companions to plush bedding, bespoke amenities, and tailored local experiences, every detail is considered with the same care as for our human guests. At the heart of it all is our beloved canine ambassador, Corey Copley, who greets each arrival with puppy kisses in our grand lobby when she isn't enjoying some well-deserved time off, end quote. For the 10 Best Readers' Choice Awards lists, USA Today travel experts select 20 nominees in a variety of categories. The publication then asks readers to cast votes to determine the top 10. Information for this item comes from Christy Palma at boston.com. Skiers in Vermont will be happy to hear that Okemo Mountain Resort in Ludlow, Vermont, have upgraded their snowmaking with improvements that will increase efficiency and reliability. Upgrades include updates to the Summit Pump House and the replacement of 15 diesel compressors with electric ones. Low-energy snow guns are getting an upgrade too, which will open up more terrain for skiers during the season. The upgrades will also reportedly allow crews to make more snow at warmer temperatures. Information for this item comes from Connor Olathorn at WCAX3. Coming up after the break, I'll be joined by Larry O'Toole, the founder of Gentle Giant Moving Company, which was founded in Boston, Massachusetts, to discuss his memoir, Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart, his business and life philosophies, and Larry will even share a few tips if you're planning to move. Stick around. You're listening to Notable New England. Notable New England is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for sharing the podcast with people you know, posting about it on your social media, and rating and reviewing the podcast on your favorite podcast app. I'm so appreciative for all of your kindness and support. You are helping to get the podcast into more ears out there and getting more people to join the Notable New England family. I want to take a moment as well to thank all of my wonderful Patreon supporters. Because of your generous monthly contributions, you are helping to cover the real costs in producing this podcast and keeping the stories coming. If you'd like to support the podcast with a monthly recurring donation, you can do that at patreon.com/Notable New England. Plans start as low as $2 a month and include early ad-free listening. Depending on your level of support, you can also get Notable New England merch and other New England goodies. Find out more at patreon.com/Notable New England. And if you'd prefer to do a one-time donation, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Notable New England. Think of it as our virtual tip jar to throw a few bucks in when you feel inspired. That's buymeacoffee.com/Notable New England. Thank you again for all of your support and for listening to the podcast. I couldn't do this without you, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you. Larry O'Toole is my guest today on the podcast, and he is the founder of Gentle Giant Moving Company that many of you know of and have seen their trucks in neighborhoods across New England. He has written a book titled Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart, about his business philosophies that have helped shape how Gentle Giant has transformed the moving industry. He moved to Boston, Massachusetts from Ireland at the age of 15 and attended Northeastern University. He pursued a career in engineering, and his work experiences in manufacturing led him to want to start his own business. He was a rower as well, and a lot of what he learned from rowing helped shape the Gentle Giant business plan, which is, quote, only hire nice people with winning personalities and strong work ethic who are intelligent, physically fit, and have a passion for service, end quote. I'm delighted to have him on the podcast today to discuss his book as well as his business ethos, and to discuss how Gentle Giant changed the moving industry in New England and beyond. Welcome to the podcast, Larry. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Let's tell the listeners a bit about the origin story of the name Gentle Giant. I love the story that you mentioned in the book and how the company came to be from a night at a party, of all places, trying to get your friend to dance with his girlfriend, to that friend then putting an ad in the Boston Phoenix unbeknownst to you, offering your moving services.
Well, that's right. He was too shy to dance with his girlfriend. So luckily, I was strong enough to pick him up, carry him out on the dance floor, and dance him in front of her. And obviously, it didn't last long. I probably went into oxygen dead after 30 seconds. But that done, he stayed out there and kept dancing after I put him down. And the next day he said to me, it's not just that you picked me up, it was that it felt comfortable. I didn't feel like a dead body being dragged around. I felt like I was power gliding. And he said, you know who you are? You're the Gentle Giant. That's the name of your moving company. And he thought of the name, and he had already had it in mind that I should try some moving because I was trying to do some odd jobs while I was trying to start a different business in manufacturing. And he had suggested it. But the next thing you know, he handed me the phone and said I had my first customer, and it was the first I heard of it. And I said, I don't even have a truck. And he says, look, you can borrow my van. I said, I don't know how much to charge. He said, why don't you charge $13 an hour and give me three for the van? And the next thing you know, I was talking to a young woman and agreed to meet her on a Saturday. And she was a fit, strong dancer. So she, in the interest of keeping costs down, worked just as hard as I did. We got the move done in 2 hours, and I charged her $25. We've done six more moves for her since. The last one in 2012 was 12,500. So that's the absolute definition of a customer for life.
Absolutely, a customer for life indeed. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, you were a rower while at Northeastern, and you mention in your book a lot about the ethos of a rower and why rowers make great movers. I'd love for you to tell us more about that.
Well, some of the things about rowers is that they are determined to get the absolute most out of themselves. I mean, it's a sport where you go all out, there's no break, and you're in complete oxygen debt after 1,500 meters, but you still have another 500 meters to go. And so the great thing about rowers, they never complain about anything because there isn't any time to do that. You're too busy pulling on the oar. And so those kind of people are great to work with because they're always optimistic and positive, and they're just fun to be around. I had so much success hiring young men and women that were involved in rowing. We have one definite requirement at Gentle Giant. We call it enthusiasm, but it really means no whining, no bitching and moaning, whether it's about the customer or the weather or the furniture or anything else. You just make the most of every situation and you support your comrades. So like if someone is having a bad day, you're going to lift their spirit. You're not going to let anything get you down. And I think that's what really brought us success.
When did you realize, wow, I've really got something here? And you realized this was going to be your career path?
Well, I wasn't yet sure it would be my career path, but I think the first time I knew I really had something was when, because there was just this little ad in the paper, but it kind of grew like wildfire because everybody would tell their friends. And of course, I was busy with other things and I only needed to do enough moving to pay the bills. And sometimes I wouldn't be available and I'd say I'm not available. And then one day I told this customer, I'm sorry, I'm just not available then. She literally started to cry. And I think that's when I knew I really had something.
Oh, that is too funny.
If a customer is going to cry because they can't use your service, that's something. So I knew I had something as things grew from just word of mouth and people telling each other. And I saw the potential. What I didn't know was would I have what it took to build this into a really viable business and take advantage of that. And it took me a few years to really make that final decision. Yeah, this is it. This is going to be my life. I could see what was possible. And I did a lot of reading. I had no business background or anything, but I read a lot and I did a lot of thinking about how I wanted to move forward. And, the one business plan I had starting out was, like you mentioned in the beginning, just hire really nice people with great work ethics who are the kind of people you'd like to spend a hard day working with. And once you get going with that, you really have to maintain a commitment to it. I think in a lot of business people are You're stuck for people, you need to hire people desperately, and people come along that are qualified to do the job. And there's a real temptation to hire them, even though maybe they're not consistent with the kind of culture you're building. And I think you just need to resist that. And figuring out how to do that at scale as the company grew, that was a real challenge. And a lot of people told me it couldn't be done. They sort of said, oh, the reason everything is going so great for you right now is because the company is small and you can maintain quality because you have your finger on every button, so to speak. And that became kind of a life goal of mine, to prove that wrong, to prove that you can grow a business to a fairly large scale and maintain that quality. And we've done it mainly by promoting from within. And we now have 26 offices and around 65 million in revenue. And it could be a lot more if we didn't just promote from within, but that's what we're committed to. And all those offices are run by people that started at entry level, but they understand the culture, they understand what we're all about. And when I visit other offices in other parts of the country, that's what I see. I see that they have consistently mirrored what we started here in Boston.
Excellent. And that's very challenging to be able to do as you expand and grow. Now, at the center of everything at Gentle Giant, you use the acronym HEART, HEART. Could you explain to the listeners what that means?
Okay, well, you see, most of the people that you hire in the moving business, a lot of them are people who want to do it for a while. They need an income while they're getting ready to do something else, maybe finishing up a qualification somewhere else or waiting to get called in the military or something like that. They're not coming in the door looking to do this for the rest of their life. But as we were growing, I noticed that people who wanted 2 or 3 months of work were still there 3 or 4 years later. And when I would say, I thought you were going to be, well, whatever, a teacher, a scientist, a business person, an accountant, whatever, they say, oh, yeah, I am going to do that, but I'm putting it off because I'm having such a great time here. And they would always say, I love the culture. Well, I didn't actually start the business with, hey, this is the culture. What I did was hired really wonderful people, and they created a culture. So at the point where I had maybe 50 movers, we wanted to really know, I wanted to know how we could describe our culture for people coming in the door, to let people know this is what we expect. This is what we expect from everyone that works here. So I had everyone go home on one particular weekend and with the one mission to come in on a Monday with the 5 values that they think described our culture. Actually, I'd read that in a book, so I did it. Anyway, anyway, we had a long list and we kind of compressed it down to about 20 core values. And we came up with the 5 core values that we thought incorporated everything that they were saying. And that's where we came up with the acronym HEART. It's H for honesty, E for enthusiasm, A for going above and beyond, R for respect, and T for teamwork. And it's interesting because going above and beyond, nobody actually had that on their list, but it described so many things they did have on their list that people just wanted to strive to go an extra step, when you talk about commitment to excellence. And that was something that was universal. And other values like teamwork incorporated people putting down how they appreciated that they were always held accountable, and accountability to them was a core value. But we thought teamwork really incorporated that. And people wrote things like the, the one of the things was our universal compassion and empathy and kindness. For instance, back then there was the AIDS epidemic, and there were a lot of AIDS victims that were needing moving services and were in desperate straits. And the AIDS Action Committee asked us if we would be willing to help out in those situations, because most moving companies had said no. And so we went and did that, and people who did those moves, they volunteered. I mean, I did pay them, even though we weren't charging for that. But the compassion and care that they put into that, and I myself, when going out with some of those moves, it was hard not to be brought to tears because you'd see people who had really created wonderful lives for themselves, and now everything had fallen apart, and it was just soul destroying. So when we talk about respect, we're combining all of that. And to us, it's a huge part of our culture because we see it missing in other companies. People come in the door and they could be made fun of or hazed in some way, or show me what you got kind of attitude. So for us, respect, and also when you are moving somebody, most of the time it's a lot of fun and people are really nice, but sometimes people are dismissive or maybe they're not on their best behavior. And what I learned, quite honestly, from somebody else I was working with, because you do tend to dismiss those people and think, okay, let me just get this over with. But this person, Rudy, we call him, his name is Stephen Leonard, who still works for us all these years later. When I would do a move with him, you know, and you ran into a less than nice customer, by the end of the move, that customer would be smiling and interacting and joking with Rudy. And so I learned that from him, you always give people the benefit of the doubt because it turns out that people are dealing with tough situations. They're not thinking about the mover's feelings. They're worried about a serious diagnosis of their spouse, or they're heartbroken to be leaving their house, or they have a sick child in the hospital, or it could be anything. But when you talk to people and ask questions and you find out what they are dealing with, you can make a really strong connection by being empathetic and interested in them, which you really are. And you end up with a great connection at the end of the time. And that's why that's a core value. And of course, I could talk about all of our values, but they're non negotiable. And although we call them values, what they do is they describe the behaviors that go along with those values. It's funny, we call it honesty. People had a lot of different words for honesty, but, that's what we call it.
From what I was reading in your book, the way you have revolutionized the moving industry with this ethos is quite amazing. I really enjoyed some of the stories you shared in the book displaying that empathy and exceptional customer service, like the story about the woman who was moving and in the middle of the move, her fiance dumped her. And the Gentle Giant moving team was trying to move her obviously into a new place, but they were also in the process consoling her and trying to get her some help as she was in a really dire mental state. I don't think I've heard of a moving company that would go that extra mile. It's typically, move the stuff, no emotion, no connection. That's that. But you can see here where those values you mentioned come into play. And I think that is different from how the moving industry was traditionally thought of.
Right. I mean, on that in that particular case, I mean, you start out doing a move, and the person is so excited, put this here, put that there, I'd like that upstairs, and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, she gets this phone call and, is devastated and no longer really cares. And people are bringing stuff into the house. And so the crew chief called our director of safety and he came down and talked to her. And although he's not a professional, his judgment was correct when he brought her to the hospital. She was suicidal, and they were able to help her so much. Yeah, that's a good example. And you talk about the moving industry, and it's true, the industry really has improved a lot over the years. And I think one of the things that people have learned from us, and it's nice because when I talk to the owners of other moving companies in other parts of the country, and they've already heard about us and they're already trying to emulate it because it's really about people. I mean, okay, you're supposed to move the furniture, but it's really about people. And that's when you see a 5-star review. This person giving the 5-star review doesn't know good moving from bad moving, but you know what? They know people. And they're giving a review to the people because they like them. And any mover will tell you how much fun it is to work with the right kind of people. But at a lot of other companies, that's not always consistent. They're sort of nervous, who am I going to be working with today? And that's not the best. And what we try to say to our people is, we're going to give you nice people to work with, and we're going to make you want to come into work every day and enjoy it. And the way you do that is hire nice people who meet those values and really understand what respect is all about.
That's a wonderful way to operate and to change the industry. It didn't seem to be the norm way back when, or what people were accustomed to expect. And as you mentioned in the book, many had just horrible experiences with moving and people that they had hired, and they would sometimes take that out on you because they were expecting, they're going to be just like the other movers I had who were just horrible. But then they end up coming around because they see that you do value them as a person and want them to have a good experience, and that sort of totally changes their mind about their perceptions of an experience with a moving company.
Yes, absolutely. At the beginning, I had that advantage that people had terrible experiences and they were really scared. So they're that much more appreciative when you show up. Nowadays, it's a little more challenging because they're expecting a really top class service. And of course, they're paying our prices because it's not cheap to deliver the service that we do. So we have to live up to it every day. And to that end, we offer a guarantee. And if somebody has any little complaint about a worker, they're getting all their money back for that person. And that keeps us honest.
Wow, excellent. I'd love to have you speak about how you navigated growth when things started to expand in the business and how you were able to hang on to the heart ethos of the business, which can be incredibly difficult to do as things grow and expand.
Well, that was challenging. I was lucky enough when I first decided to commit to this. I knew I needed help on the financial side of things. And I was lucky enough to have a wonderful guy working for me who had just finished up a master's in business at Boston University. And when I asked him if he was interested in being a partner, to be honest, I didn't expect him to say yes, but he did. And so he's one of the reasons that our growth in the beginning was so smooth. And we actually got named to the Inc. 500 in the first 5 years. But then as we got to that size, which was about 3 million, he certainly felt like we should be careful about growing much bigger because we might lose control of things. And he was very aware of all the things that can go wrong when you build up a big overhead. And we sort of had a winning formula at the time. So a lot of thought went into, should we keep this growth going? And like I said earlier, I did a lot of reading about it because one of the things they tell you is that it's a whole different thing about running an established company as opposed to building a company in the beginning where you're wearing all the hats. Obviously, and also as an entrepreneur, you're not by nature a delegator. So that was something I really had to commit to, delegating and basically trusting other people and letting people make mistakes. I think it's almost an art because when you hire somebody in the beginning, you have to show them the ropes and they need training. So when do you step back and let them fly solo? When do you do that? And if you don't step back soon enough, you're going to be micromanaging somebody and not trusting them to do their job and demoralizing them. And of course, if you step back too soon, the opposite's going to happen, and they're sort of out there making mistakes that they really needed more guidance. So you really have to think hard about that, which I did. And sometimes you do see that you have to, as you promote people and put them into more, give them more responsibilities, you have to trust their judgment. And if you see that there are going to be times when they need to come and ask for help, to say, listen, I'm a bit confused here. Can you help me with this? And some people who don't do that, well, that's a bit of a red flag. So you need to know the judgment and also the people who are doing the opposite and constantly looking for direction and what do I do now? What do I do now? So both of those are bad. So you need the people who have the judgment to make their own decisions, but also know when, hey, I could use a word of advice here. I need to talk to somebody who has more experience with this than I do. So I guess you'd call it an art almost. And the goal being all along, because of course, in the beginning, when you're working anywhere up to 16 hours a day going crazy, the goal is to get to a point where you can step away, take a vacation, and not worry and know everything's in good hands. And that's the goal, to get to that point. But also, yeah, bringing in coaches and training, because that's one of the things that was very important for us is because I mean, even our leadership team now at this stage, they all started at entry level. And that didn't happen just miraculously. I mean, they needed training and they needed to study and get a lot of mentoring for that to happen. But we're committed to that. And there are wonderful coaches out there, I'm sure you're well aware of it, who come in and take it really seriously and really help people to really blossom and have confidence in themselves and develop the skills they're going to need. And I'm very happy with that outcome.
I love that in the book you mentioned that you don't do annual performance reviews and that the coaching is really ongoing and feedback is ongoing. So employees always know where they stand versus coming to the end of the year review and then being surprised, as often happens in companies. Can you speak more about that and how this has helped Gentle Giant?
Well, yes. I mean, working in the corporate world for so many years, I could really see. I mean, look, when I say that performance reviews are bad, it's not 100%. It's just that they end up being bad because they're not always executed correctly. And I think it's very challenging to do that. And I think one of the biggest problems is if someone goes into a performance review and something surprises them, they're told, oh, you failed in this area. And it comes as news to them. But the biggest mistake that people make with performance reviews is they're tied to pay. So somebody comes in and the outcome is, are they going to get a raise? And if so, what percentage of a raise? And are they going to be given marks out of a certain number? For instance, when I was an engineer, you were given marks out of 9. There were maybe a dozen or more different categories, and you'd be a 7 here and a 6 there, and all the rest of it. But it all boils down at the end. What does that mean for my eventual success and forward movement in the company? So the performance review, nobody's listening to the feedback. They're just waiting to hear, where am I? Am I going to get a raise or not? And of course, if they're not, they're upset. So we do a lot of coaching with people on receiving and giving feedback. And also to supervisors and managers, I'm not going to sit here and say we're perfect or anything, but this is what we strive for and what we advocate for is continuous feedback where people are told how they're doing. And you have to coach people like right away on the first day of work, we talk to people about receiving feedback because it's so important. Because if you bristle, if the body language is negative, if you get upset getting feedback, then somebody is very reticent about giving it to you. They don't want to upset you. I mean, they have to work with you. And they tend to mix it up, like mixing good and bad with together. So getting people to understand that you start by creating trust by finding a lot of positive feedback in the beginning. So when you do run into something that needs to be corrected, the person isn't going to get upset. And so setting up that kind of culture, I think is very important, where people aren't going to be grumbling about, whatever feedback they were given, like, oh my God, my boss is a jerk or whatever. But what we do is we do what we call giant steps. And that's when you sit down and talk to people. And one of the big questions is their aspirations in life. So you're talking to somebody in the moving industry, and you want them to be comfortable telling you that they'd really like to move on and do something else. And you need to tell them, how can I help you get there? I mean, it's always, you never want to lose a valuable employee, but you're better off losing them if that's the best thing for them, because you need people to know that they're in a supportive environment and they don't have to just keep everything and then throw out their 2 weeks notice and shock everybody. Like, what I really like is somebody is going to say, decides they want to be a teacher, and this has happened. And you'll know way ahead of time, it's not something that's kind of kept under the radar and they're afraid they won't get scheduled or they're afraid they won't get promoted. So we try to treat everybody as if they'll be with us forever, but knowing that's not true, but that's how we're going to treat them. And so it makes a huge difference. But you have to be developing people, because if somebody moves on, you need somebody that's going to move up into their place. And for that, everybody needs to know that they need to be developing their successor. They need to be looking at the person that's going to take over from them. And it was very important for me to model that myself, which I did with the person that took over as CEO for me. In fact, he had 5 years to get ready to do it. Now, that's the perfect situation. But the worst possible situation is somebody leaves, and now you have like 5 minutes to try to find out who's going to replace them. that people are putting ads in the paper and running around desperately. It's always a hassle. So you need people to think about it. What's going to happen when they leave? Or they move up, or they move into another position? Is there somebody coming along that can wear their shoes and take over for them? And it's important to make that part of your culture.
What would you say has been your biggest challenge that you've had to face as a business owner?
I think what I mentioned earlier about growth is probably the biggest because it involves risk. And by the way, the person that, and I might have mentioned it in the book, the person who was doing all the financial things and was my partner, a 30% owner, he asked me to buy him out at one point because he wasn't comfortable with risk. And he couldn't really step into a chief financial officer role the way an owner should be able to do. And so that freed me up to hire a professional chief financial officer. But this guy was and is probably the world's greatest controller. And so, guess what? Even though he asked for a 1 year contract, never actually left. And he still works for a company as he approaches retirement now. But that was a big challenge, really evaluating risk, whether to stick your neck out and do something, especially when you're buying real estate or something like that, where if you do the wrong thing, you can really sink the ship. At one point, we were being told we had to sell our facility or the city might take it by eminent domain. And we were looking for another place, and we were very close to signing it. And if we had signed it, that might have been the end of everything because the recession, the 2008 collapse of things happened, and we would have been stuck holding two properties because the sale of our place fell through. But luckily, before we had signed for the other thing, and everything went to hell in a handbasket, and it was another 12 years before that happened again. And this time, when we sold on the condition that they would find us another place to go. It was part of the condition of the sale. So it was a smoother transition, but just shows you what can happen when you're stuck. So yeah, that's it. But also, yeah, personnel issues can be very challenging because terrible things happen in people's lives and it can really affect where they work. So yeah, I think dealing with risk is it. Yeah.
How has failure shaped how you approach business?
Well, I think, with failure, sometimes you can be overcome with a real feeling of doom and gloom. Oh my God, all is lost, so to speak. But I think that's when it's so important to stick to your principles and maintain optimism and don't suddenly go into a big tear, laying people off and everything else. And I think involving people in the solutions, like to be able to sit down with members of your staff and people and say, listen, this could really go badly. We've really had a really bad turn of events here. And how do you think we should deal with it? So you get other people involved. And as a result, we've never ended up finishing a year in the red. We've always stayed positive. So failure is, well, it's a word, but the real failure is when you succumb to it. So when you don't, it ends up as not failure in the end. You get through it. It makes I think the old saying, if it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, there's a lot of truth to that. And finding our way through those tough challenges has probably been a good thing. I remember one time, you see, in the 90s, we had sort of built our own IT ourselves with people that had a little bit of skill because the company was small enough that we could do it. But we needed a soup to nuts. Now, nowadays, 26 years, 28 years later, that stuff's available. You can go buy it. But back then, there really wasn't systems that fit directly for us. So we had to hire a company to come in and build our system. And we did a lot of vetting, and we we got, I mean, we ended up paying close to $600,000, which at the time was a lot of money, but would have been really worth it. Well, guess what? The dot-com boom happened. And so anybody that could write their name backwards got to be a programmer. And unfortunately, this company made a mess of it and they never delivered. And it was either a lawsuit or write off the money. And we wrote the money off. We weren't going to be doing it. And I mean, that was a massive failure. But the person that we'd hired to kind of keep our system together with chewing gum and scotch tape, we were able to get him to come on full time. And he still works to this day. And make sure that all of our IT is so well handled to this point. But we had to build our own system. In the end, we had to revert to fixing our own system as opposed to bringing in something else. I guess that was a failure, but we survived.
Right. I love hearing about how you've handled failure because so often we hear all of the success stories in businesses, and we're so conditioned as a society to view failure as the end of the world. So it's nice to hear a company owner discuss that and show that failure really is a lesson.
Bad things can happen at any minute, and you have to be prepared for it. Like COVID, for instance. It was terrifying in the very beginning, but actually, we were thought of as a core service that had to be, we were given the green light to continue working. And all of a sudden, a lot of people were moving because they could work remotely. But a lot of our workers were taking government subsidies because of the danger, and especially if they were married to people that were in the healthcare industry and they had small children, they couldn't work anyway for that reason. But we were able to, and we didn't do what a lot of people did. We didn't offer people bonuses to come back to work. What we did do, though, was the people who did hang in there with us, we gave them really strong bonus money as gratitude for that. And I think gradually people started coming back. So we got through it that way.
What inspired you to write your book, Heavy Lifting?
You know, in the back of your mind, you always think you'd like to write a book, but I never really thought that I had what it took. Growing up in Ireland with the Christian Brothers, they obviously worked hard to teach you how to write, but they also worked hard at letting you know that you were, well, from an American point of view, that you sucked. Yeah, I basically had a lot of red marks all over anything I ever wrote. They tried very hard to convince me that I could never be a writer, and I guess I kind of believed them. So for that reason, I probably wasn't going to do it. But so many people would say to me, you've really got to tell your story. This is a great story and you've got to tell it. So there was that. And also trying to say to other business owners that if they cared to read the book, that, you don't need to obsess about the bottom line all the time. If you bring the right people in, things will work out. And that's what happened for me. I can't promise it would happen for everyone else, but I wanted to show that can work. You're showing that to other business owners. Because even people that worked for me and then went off and started their own businesses, and even though they've done well, they, where they fail, in my mind, in some level, is they do get completely become a slave to the bottom line and make all their decisions based on that. And it's disappointing when you see it. I mean, it doesn't mean they're bad companies or anything, but what I did, where I just said, let the bottom line take care of itself and don't obsess about it. Obviously, you have people in your financial department who are going to raise red flags and they look at the numbers, but you're constantly saying to people and to your managers, stick with the program, hire the right people. It'll all come around. For an example, down in Charlotte, North Carolina, when we opened down there, it was very hard to get started because people just didn't seem interested in hiring us, didn't want to pay our prices or whatever it was, because, of course, we were paying our people better than average. So I was told by consultants that I should shut that office down. So when I went down there and spent some time with the people who were running in that office and doing the work down there, I came back and I said, they're a raging success. And it said, well, how can you say that? They're losing money. And I said, guess what? They're a fantastic company doing brilliant work, and I'm really proud of them. And if this doesn't work, we might as well shut our doors altogether because this is what our company is all about. And if that doesn't work, we should just get out of business because it worked up here and it'll work down there. Well, today I would challenge anyone to say that we're not the best moving company in Charlotte and that they're doing really well and are very successful because the belief that you keep going out there doing great work is going to pay off eventually. I mean, it takes a while for the word to get around. And of course, nowadays with the internet, anybody can tell any lies they want. And rather than talking to their friends, will often just go online and look at reviews, which are often not even reliable. But whatever it is, don't worry. If you're doing good work, it'll pay off, however, in the end, whether it's people talking, whether it's reviews or whatever, the word is going to get around. People will know if they want a really good job done and they call you, that's what's going to happen. And they can decide whether they want to pay for it or not. But that's worked. And that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Because, it was called failure in the beginning, but it's actually a huge success today.
What do you hope that readers walk away with after reading your book?
Well, actually, it's nice to hear people react to the book by saying, oh, I really enjoyed the book. I mean, it's nice that it's not just a sort of a textbook and that people at least tell me and tell others that they had fun reading it and it was a nice read. So you want at least that. But letting people know that, well, not to be patting myself on the back like some jerk, but the good guys win now and again, and we try to be the good guys. And that you can run a business like this and be successful and getting the word out. And sometimes people ask me what I'm proudest of. And what I am proudest of is that when the time came about 20 years ago and people started approaching me to try to buy the business, and that just has never stopped. And at one point, I could have got a lot of money. And what are you going to do with a lot of money? Well, different people have different things they're going to do with it. But other people I know that created great businesses and sold them are now seeing their business in tatters because people came in and they just wanted to cut costs and do all kinds of maneuvers to make it more profitable or whatever. And they call it good management. I have another word for it. I call it bad management. But anyway, that's just me. But what I'm proud of is that I decided to hand the company on to my right hand man, Tom O'Gorman, and give him a chance to buy me out over a 20-year period for what's nobody's going to complain if they, you certainly have enough money to have a decent life. It's not the massive amounts you might get when you go to the highest bidder. But to me, it was more important that to keep, I created something I was really proud of, and I wanted to give it a chance to continue like that. When a painter paints a painting, 100 years later, it's still the same. Somebody doesn't buy the painting and go, "Oh, I can improve this," and slash all over it. Oh, this should be this, this should be that. But a company is different. It's like a painting where the paint is running down the canvas and you're constantly pushing it back to where it should be. Because that's what it's like maintaining a culture. It's constant work. You can't just hang it up on a wall and say, there it is forever, like a painter can do or a sculptor. But I still took pride in having created this and wanted to give it every chance to continue to survive and still be the same. And also for all the people that work at Gentle Giant. For those that want to stick around, it's not going to change. Their lives aren't going to be uprooted by new ownership coming in and making all kinds of changes. People coming in, firing everybody, whatever they do. So that's what I'm proudest of.
Now, being that we are a New England podcast and we focus on the people, places, and things that make this area so wonderful and great, I'd love to hear how being in New England shaped your business.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you're a business and you promote from within and you want to expand and you're hiring obviously New Englanders because you're in New England, well, you know what? They never want to leave. Hey, would you like to go help open an office somewhere else? Oh no, like if I can't go to Lake Winnipesaukee, I'm gonna die. It's like, okay, people who grow up in New England, they tend to love New England and they love the seasons and they love what we have here, the proximity to Hampshire and Vermont and to the ocean and so many other things. It's just a wonderful place to live. And sometimes people come in here and complain about our drivers or something like that. But all you have to do is start talking to a New Englander to find out how nice they are. And I've worked in other parts of the country where people seemed really nice until you started talking to them. And then they sort of let you know basically how much they hate da 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 da. When you get invited to someone's house for dinner and all of a sudden they would start speaking quite comfortably in a racist or sexist manner, even though they're really nice out front. But in New England, people may be a little suspicious of you in the beginning, but once you get to know them, guess what? They're really nice people here.
Now, with the big September move in coming soon in New England and Boston in particular, with the students moving back to campuses or into apartments, can you give us some tips for people that they should know about when hiring movers or preparing for a move?
Well, I think the moving is so busy at the end of August that it's very important to book a mover well ahead of time.
How far in advance would you say?
For the end of August, if you're going to move in one of those really busy days, if you can do it 6 weeks ahead, that's not a mistake. Because once you get to 3 weeks, by the 1st of August, we're already booked out for those days. And one thing that's especially difficult is You have a lot of temporary labor in the summer, and a lot of that is college people. And now the colleges all go back early. So, in addition to it being really busy, people are actually losing staff at the same time. So, getting booked soon. But the other thing is not relying on too much on the internet. Like, take Yelp, for instance, they have reviews, but keep in mind that's a company that's trying to make a lot of money. And where do they get the money? They get it off businesses that are being reviewed. So do the math. That's wrong. It's a conflict of interest. It shouldn't happen. So, yeah, some of those reviews are going to be reliable, but some of them, no. And I've seen companies that are really bad have all these 5-star reviews, and I don't know how the hell that happens. But you've got to be careful. So make sure, don't be all worried about the cost, because at the end of the day, some of these lower cost people, they number one could take too long to do the job. They might do a lot of damage. You don't know what their hiring practices are. They could have people coming into your house with criminal convictions. You just don't know. Now, the good companies, that's not going to happen. But you got to make sure you get a decent company. And when you get these small companies that just have 2 or 3 trucks, some of them are really great and they are going to be lower cost. But keep in mind that some of them are going to be awful. So make sure you get good references. I think a good thing to do, especially if you're hiring a smaller company, is to ask for their address. Go down there in the morning, 7 o'clock or whatever, and see what the hell's going on. And you might come away saying, oh my God, I'm never going to go with these people. Or you might say, wow, this is pretty impressive. It's good to actually take a look under the hood. Obviously, in the old days, you had friends telling you stuff, and that's the most reliable thing. So if you can get recommendations from people who have actually used the company, that's important. If you're going to move yourself and rent a truck, it's crazy. So a couple of things, make sure you go to an actual facility. For instance, they might have, like somebody I know just rented their truck at Home Depot. Nothing wrong with Home Depot or anything like that, but the truck wasn't there, and then they have to wait and wait. So go to a place that's established and that's their headquarters, so to speak. And the best tip of all is show up early. Like if they open at 7 o'clock, get there 20 minutes before that or more. And the reason is you'll be first in line because a whole bunch of people are going to come in. They're all going to want to rent trucks. You're going to have to wait for all that paperwork. And guess what? They might run out of trucks before they get to you. And you might have to wait to have all this. But if you're the first one, you'll get taken care of and the truck will be there and they will be able to take care of you right away because you're first in line. I think that's the biggest, most important tip if you're going to rent and move yourself. And don't forget to ask them for furniture pads. Now, they'll usually gouge you for those because it costs them nothing and it's free money. It's like buying the big soda at a fast food. That's how they make their money. But you do need those pads. And sometimes you can make a deal, especially if you're booking ahead of time and they have a certain price. And you might say, oh, could you throw in a couple of dozen moving pads and for that price? And it doesn't cost them anything. So they might say, oh, yeah, sure. But make sure you have the stuff to protect your furniture. And also, there are companies that can provide labor to help. And you've got to be very careful with that too. Well, we do it. We might be a little expensive for a lot of people who are moving themselves, but it can pay off. You got a professional moving your truck that's going loading your truck that'll make sure everything is safe. And it's much more important at the load end than at the unload. Unloading is a lot easier, but you've got to take it slow because as you're unloading, you don't want to move something and have something else fall over and break. So these are a lot of things. And I've seen people make mistakes on loading their own things. Like they'll take out a piece of furniture that's kind of tall and wide, and it'll get blown over by the wind. Or they'll take a bunch of pictures and stack them all against each other, and all these no-nos that you've got to be so careful about when you're moving yourself. The list is endless, actually, but we've got so much time.
Most definitely. Well, I would like to end the interview just by asking you where folks can get a copy of your book, Heavy Lifting, and also information about Gentle Giant in case they would like to use Gentle Giant for their moving needs.
Right. Well, the book is available on Amazon. It's in a few bookstores. I noticed that the Brookline Booksmith had some, but I think for the most part, you can just go on Amazon and order it, and it'll be there if you within a couple of days if you have Prime. The other thing is, yeah, everything's on our website as far as getting a hold of us and finding out all about us. And of course, I'm not the person who deals with all of the Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, whatever. I'm not an expert on all that, but we're out there. You'll see us on all those platforms.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Larry, for coming on the podcast to discuss your memoir, Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart. I'll provide links to your Amazon page where people can order the book. And if you can support your local bookstore, check them out. And if they don't have it in stock, many can order it and get it within a few days. Also, I'll provide the link for Gentle Giant Moving Company in the show notes if anyone has any questions or potentially want to reach out to them regarding their moving services. I really enjoyed our conversation today, Larry, and I think our lovely listeners did as well and got some great advice from you that they can use if they are starting their own businesses or even if they just want to apply some of the principles to their daily lives. Thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Yes, it was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Notable New England, and thank you again to my guest, Larry O'Toole, for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and that you'll pick up a copy of Larry's memoir, Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart, at Amazon or at your local New England bookseller. If they don't have it in stock, fear not. Many indie bookstores will order it for you and have it in the store within a few days. Please support your local bookstores if you can. I'll be back on Sunday, August 2nd with a new episode of Notable New England, and I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care, everybody.